This is Pete Moore on Halo Talks NYC. I have the pleasure of having my old friend from the industry and always a guy ahead of the curve, Bryan O'Rourke, coming in from the great old state of Louisiana. How you doing, buddy?
Pete, can you believe it's December of 2020? It seems like that 5 years ago. It was December of 2019, right?
Well, it's been a rough year for all of us. We've learned a lot, but I've been to a lot of your webinars and live events at URSA, and I always kind of viewed you as a year or two ahead of where the industry was, and you kind of going through your presentation and putting up logos of top 20 brands and companies that are outside of our industry to say, hey, look, you got to think differently. You got to get ahead of where the market is. And, for better or for worse, I feel like, this pandemic has kind of caught up to the fact that what you've been preaching is now got to be put into motion, and it's got to happen now. So maybe give a little bit of background for the people that the couple of people that don't know you, what you've been doing, and we can riff about, where the industry's going and where you see the opportunities.
Yeah, well, just look me up at Bryan K. O'Rourke. It's Bryan with a Y, and you'll see all my various writings and the like. But, I was a technologist and began in technology in the early 80s in the food and beverage industry, and have worked in tech for quite a while and didn't really enter the health and fitness space until probably the mid to late 90s. So growing the Smoothie King brand, but and then having a number of companies. We have 14 operating companies, and a number of them are our investments that we operate in, and we work in technology. I'm also involved as well as a board member of URSA and sit on the Fitness Industry Technology Council that I handle, which is a nonprofit. So, and advise a lot of brands, and have written a lot of books and articles and on the subject, and started talking about this about a decade ago. And so it's no different. You're a pretty studied guy in the realms of economics and business. So, everything you've seen happening in retail, hospitality, food and beverage, all of these different markets and industry spaces, all the same things are coming to our industry space. And the thing that a cautionary tale for this space is the fact that in order for Google and Apple and others, even Samsung, some might argue, to be relevant to their valuations in the coming years, the last marketplace they have to penetrate is health. And so what you're seeing now is an industry space that is much bigger than the ones that you and I were both in 10 and 15 years ago. I mean, and that poses massive opportunity and huge operating risk, right?
Yeah. I mean, look, when when the pandemic hit and you saw Peloton's valuation, and you just saw that they, mysteriously stopped putting their commercials on my CNN and MSNBC channels, you knew they were out of inventory, because there's no way they would have stopped the marketing if they weren't out of inventory. I think, from a blessing and a curse, the COVID is probably somewhat of a blessing for the bricks and mortar guys to say, hey, look, like that's the only way I can reach people. And, I gotta actually think about my club as a relationship with a member, regardless of where they are, and not to think that the relationship starts when they, enter my club. So I feel like, thankfully, in a weird way, if we didn't have COVID, we might have been too far behind. Yeah. By the time we actually got our act together. So you've talked a lot about digital transformation and the new words hybridization. I'm not sure where that came from, but I'll use it.
I created hybridization.
Oh, you did? All right. I'll trademark that with a TM. Yeah, I don't want that. I'll take out Halo, by the way, is royalty free. So feel free to use the word Halo whenever you want. And I'm going to use hybridization, and we'll just do like a.
Well, Amazon used Halo.
It's like a barter deal, I don't have the trademark for a wearable sleep technology, or else I'd go after them with a cease and desist, try and get a payment, and then retire. So, but you've been preaching this and evangelizing, and I don't think that's too, I think that's an accurate word. You've been somewhat the evangelist at URSA of saying, hey, look, let's get there, or let's at least be in the position to take advantage of this. So how do you think people are doing? What tools are they using effectively? I think obviously everyone's kind of graduated from the Zoom to something else, but what's your take on where we're at and how it's going?
Yes, it's a big question, right? So as you know, depending on who you talk to, and I know that you probably have some proprietary research of your own regarding this, probably, as many as 25 to 30% of rooftops in the US will be shut down, and that's probably going to come to some kind of, way we can measure it by March or so. But at the same time, COVID, the vaccine's coming out. This may very well be a roaring 20s kind of scenario following the Spanish flu. And I wouldn't be surprised, even with a change of administrations, the Congress looking like it's going to be not leaning Democratic. So you're going to have, no significant move on taxation policy and other things that might thwart it, still free and easy money. And then you get the pandemic, a lot of pent up demand. So those macro trends, and then as you all well know, the macro trends of underlying health and fitness they're still there. And, so I think those are all positives. But in the interim, given what's going on and the level of expectation of customer, they're going to be the haves and the have nots. And so smaller operators are going to have a big problem. People with the capital and capability, management talent, cheaper locations, the ability to acquire, you see UFIT just announced its reorg today. And that's some pain in the interim, but really a culling and people's ability to restructure their balance sheets and giving the opportunity for people to grow and other people to coalesce and many to exit. But, outside of that, the digital component is still going to be a growing dynamic behind the service of the member. The idea of convenience via digital and in club experience is going to be center of the plate. And if people aren't focusing on that, now you're going to have some outliers. You're probably going to have a couple of concepts that ban smartphones from the front door and make a kind of an interesting, hardcore statement about their positioning. And I'm sure that not everyone is going to need to be technologically advanced, but for the most part, there's some basic table stakes today with respect to how a customer or member wants to and expects to interact with their brand. And so the days of having an app just to say you have an app versus having a integrated experience for a member, very different. And certain organizations don't have the mindset, nor the patience, nor the capacity to necessarily pull that off, and they're going to be harmed. And the ones that do are going to thrive. And so brands like Planet Fitness that are very much focused on these things, along with other brands, they have a huge opportunity to monetize the lifetime value of a member like people weren't able to do before. And so I'm very bullish. I'm also, cautionary about the fact that pure digital offerings are going to continue to grow. As you know, they've been growing double digits for almost a decade. And with the proliferation of devices and new platforms like Halo from Amazon and others, right? Those firms have got to grow and to maintain their stock value. And when you look at Apple, for example, Apple is going to get in the health business, and that's been their strategy for a number of years now. And they have to gain that share because that's one of the only major markets they're going to be able to expand into. So you're going to see this kind of vortex of push. It was starting before pandemic, right, Pete? I mean,
sure.
It's going to get more aggressive, I think. So it's going to grow a market, rising tides lift all boats. But if you are in that tide and you're in a dinghy, you might flip over.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I mean, one of the interesting things is, and we run this educational series called Halo Academy. And, when you stop and take a look back and say, okay, Netflix and Blockbuster, there was actually a time when those two companies were going to merge, and the Blockbuster guys basically killed the deal. So, as you look and say, okay, I've seen this movie in other industries, let's take the movie and have a sequel in the health club industry. Like when you see an announcement of, Apple Plus coming out, some clubs might say, oh, bring it on. And some clubs might say, hey, how can I partner with those guys? Like they got a pretty badass piece of hardware. It's a really good software, so why do I have to fight that? Maybe I can figure out how to be a part of that. Do you think, when you talk about mindset, do you think there's enough mindset, change to say, hey, look, they're going to spend a lot of capital in pulling off what they're doing. So I'm not betting against them. How do I get on that train?
Right. That's right. And, because the technology businesses, software is eating the world. There's zero marginal costs for them to support new customers, and they have an infrastructure. They have a network effect because of the fact that they already have 1.5 billion devices out there in the real world. So your ability to monetize those people is very high at a very low relative cost. So, and Apple's Gym Kit effort, although it only represents about less than 1% of installed equipment today, their partnerships with their reward system. But the thing that I'm a little worried about for the club business, I think this is probably unlikely, is remember Apple's gangster move of a couple decades ago was getting into retail, and they are arguably one of the most successful retailers in the world, and no one saw that coming. So, and that's the thing that's different than the Netflix days with Blockbuster's, era. That was at a time where the web wasn't nearly as prolific. So now, you have to even be more thoughtful. But to your point, Pete, people in the club business better really look at those brands as being strategic, but also partners, but also be wary, because Barnes and Nobles, they were busting the champagne bottles open when they, or Books A Million was busting the champagne bottles open when they did the deal with Amazon, but less than 1.5 years later, they were out of business. So you got to be careful.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's an interesting point. Some of the, now I've had time to brainstorm a little because I'm on an airplane at 4:30 in the morning, flying out of Newark to, all parts unknown. If you think about like with Netflix, what Netflix should probably do is they should open up a Netflix and fitness and take over a chain of movie theaters and say, hey man, half of this is going to be come in and watch a Netflix original and screens 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and 2, 4, 6, 8 is basically streaming content, and have like, video fitness studio streaming with, Dolby sound system, and, bring your kids and drop them off at the Disney screen, and I'm going to go do a workout. So yes, I think that they're a potential competitor at some point as well. And maybe the best way for us to get ahead of that is to say, hey, look, we'll run these things for you. This isn't as easy as you think. Like, let's partner up. Right. And then also you take a look at Amazon buying Whole Foods. It's not too far a move on a chessboard to say, does Amazon go and buy 24-hour fitness or regional health club chain? And that would be great. I mean, there's Amazon lockers in some of the clubs that I've seen. What you talked about, the Halo band, I could see integration happening there. So, from your standpoint and how you're helping your clients right now, in addition to helping the industry kind of change the way they think, what are some of the highlights over the last 6 months that have been, you've had a client conversation and you kind of came away from that and like, might have smiled and be like, hey, they get it. Like they're actually asking me to do something that I've been preaching, and I don't have to like convince them now.
Well, so before the pandemic hit, a lot of my work in the 3 or 4 years prior was getting people to exit out of their businesses in this space. Right. Because I felt valuations were ridiculously high. I thought there was going to be some event. And if you talk to some of my clients, I'm not going to name names. I said, this has been going too long. Something's going to happen and you need to exit now. And I was fortunate enough to help a number of my clients get out. Yeah. And now they look back and they
got to be loving you, right? Yeah. I got some guys some money off the table and they're like, thank you. Appreciate that. Even at the time, they're like, oh, the multiple, it's like only 7.5. It's not 7 3/4. I'm like, dude, take the money, have it in your checking account and thank me later.
Yeah, come back another day if you want to risk some capital at a better price. But back to your point, like you were mentioning when we were getting on the line about what did you call it, therapy for business owners. I think a lot of the time now is, obviously the crisis of operations in general, and people really focused on cutting costs. How do you operate and deal with the near? I don't know. You spent a lot of time with people on that, dealing with landlords, dealing with various creditors, dealing with the immediacy of issues. But the big challenge I see with clients today, it's the hardest thing, is when you have entrenched leadership that's been in the industry a long time. And it becomes very difficult for them to truly think strategically. It's very hard. When you bring up ideas of Amazon buying a chain of clubs, I mean, not that we're saying they'll do that, but they could do that just, sniffling their nose. I mean, these people are worth Apple computers, it's a couple $1 trillion for the company's value. I mean, it would be nothing for them to buy one of these things. Yeah. So, when you live in that world now, it's difficult to think strategically, really hard, especially if you don't have a hell of a lot of resources. Now, there are some brands out there, and I can't name names. I know you know some of them, that they're going to have the advantage of being able to function that way. But I think more than anything, it's getting people to think strategically and realize that while things will be behind us from this, and hopefully in the next 6 to 9 months we can move back to normalcy, as I see you guys in your New York offices. The reality is that the customer is not going to go back to the way things were in many respects, and you're going to have to either change and deliver your service model in new ways, or you're not going to be relevant. And so doing that is really the hard part, right? And how do you do it? And a lot of times it's not just the technology; it's the thought. It's the kind of thought process and mindset of the people at the table. Their minds just can't get their head around it. It's very hard.
Yeah, I mean, so many old practices, just don't work anymore, and this kind of shown a light on that. Just to give you an example, because we're obviously hopefully a couple of people are going to listen to this. Sure, probably we're going to break the internet, given that we had you on, thankfully. Yeah. But I was dealing with a client, and I will not release their name, but they were doing some member transfers because they're shrinking the number of clubs. And somebody in the room said, the people that haven't checked into the club, let's not really alert them too much because they're like sleeper members. And I said, look, that's bullshit. Okay, those people are canceling anyway. Why don't you get a relationship? Call them up and say, look, I know this has been rough for you. It's been rough for us. We're closing your club. How can I help you achieve your 2021 goals instead of waiting for them to just cancel on the contact us page? So do you think, look, if somebody who's not using, I see these ads from like Wells Fargo, they give you a list of everything that's hitting your bank account right now, and they give you alerts so you can turn them on and off. So as a health club member, don't think that a member that's not showing up is going to, into perpetuity, not cancel, because the new wave of consumers doesn't put up with that anymore. Yeah. So have you seen, I mean, that's one of like the paradigm shifts that I think we need to proliferate. And like an active member who's getting results is somebody that you want, not somebody that you want to hopefully, their ACH and their credit card goes through.
And that's one of the main pillars of thinking that's got to get unwound. I mean, even with marketing, let sleeping dogs lie have been, don't disturb those folks because they're going to cancel. And that is just a it's dead thinking. Yeah. And then on top of it, the trends that are going on in payment, increasingly, that's going to change dramatically as well, where that's an opportunity for great companies that are able to execute on value add delivery of services, where people are saying, oh, yes, more, please. And I'll pay for that. And I'll pay for that. And I'll pay for that, which is an abundance mentality from a provider versus a scarcity one, which is, I just want your, $30 a month and just don't bother me. That is not building long-term value anymore.
Well, one thing I want to bring up with you, because you've been in the industry for a while, you're also a technology guy. Some people lean so hard on the fact that like, hey, I sent an email out, and I'm like, just hold on a second. Like somebody said to me the other day, well, I got, 800 members and we sent an email out and they didn't show up at this new studio that were like, got all COVID proofed. And I'm like, oh, you got 800 people. Like, let's get on the phone and call these people, or let's stand outside and give out passes. I feel like there needs to be, people are using technology in the club as an excuse for not doing the work. Yeah. And the work is to build a relationship. Sure. Relationships matter. So when you talk to people, do you kind of sometimes, because you're like the technology guy, and I think that's great. At the same time, you're also an operating guy and understand how these businesses work. Right. So do you kind of say to them, hey, look, yeah, we got a hybridization going on, which is a O'Rourke trademark, which I will now reference to you, and that's cool. But y'all say, look, you gotta like, don't forget, like there's a human element here, and that's what that matters.
Yeah. So again, everyone brings this up, but Apple's a great example of how they, that deft integration of human with tech is a very good example. And yes, emails are not enough, but we use SMS in a lot of our programs. We use bots, but those bots are backed by people. And, when it comes to calling the 800 members, that's a great idea. If you can't scale that, there's certainly technology that'll help you scale it well. But in the end, it's people talking with people. That's what you have to, you have to seek that. I think it's a good balance. But you're right. I think people do use excuses or the lowest form of tech to think they did something when they didn't really do anything. And being an operator, so we have companies, we have clubs in Thailand, we have investments in Europe and the Americas. We own the company Vertimax, which is a pretty well-known sports performance brand. So I deal with this kind of stuff day to day. And you're right, even when talking with clients, we also advise a pretty well-known franchise brand. So you're right. I mean, today you have to be more sophisticated than that. You have to be more understanding the fact that when it comes to just emails, there's just a proliferation of that kind of content. You have to do a better job of earning loyalty. In the last couple of years, the most valuable asset that a business has is the degree of trust it has with its customer base. The trust is eroded to an all-time low, according to the Edelman barometer. And so brands that do whatever it takes to make people think that they give a shit about them are going to be the ones over the long term that win. And it's how you behave. So to your point, if you really do give a shit, sorry to curse, if you really do give a shit, you're going to act like you give a shit. And giving an email to somebody is not giving a shit.
Yeah, I agree with that. So last question to just pick your brain on here for our audience. The power of the relationship with the group exercise instructor and the personal trainer has clearly, been magnified by COVID and trainers having relationships that they have now. I would argue that they own a lot of the relationships, whether it's through Zoom or whether it's through televideo or, pick a platform. Do you think that from a mindset change, not just on your business, but, understanding that like, if I own a health club, maybe I should think more like I own a Broadway theater to go down this path. And I'm like the stadium and like all these players are like the stars. And I got to figure out a revenue share deal that makes them kind of responsible for with the relationship that they have. And I'm like their bricks and mortar and I'm also like their technology trampoline. So I just want to get your take on that.
Oh, yeah. You've seen that happen. Well, it happened with Equinox. They were going down that road with their own talent agency.
Right.
That's been
great point. Yeah.
And that's smart. And yes, I mean, and that's really business as a platform, right? Because, what's happening in telemedicine right now with doctors leaving in droves to serve on platforms and different ways that even medical services will be delivered and monetization opportunities. People will pay for highly professional, personalized service. And the battle for talent, when I talk in my presentations about the execution engines of the future, it's data, it's enterprise software solutions where all the data connects, okay? It's automation that comes from that, and finally, human capital. And so it's the balance of those four things. And so, that will require people to rethink their business models, Pete. I mean, there's no doubt, and do the things you're describing, because you're not going to get quality people to work for your brand or with you in the way that customers are going to get blown away by if you're just, not doing something different to be a differentiator, not only in the income you can provide them, but in the way they actually work. Remote work is still going to be a big aspect of going forward. And I can see clubs having trainers or health coaches or other professionals using tools that don't even require them to be in a club.
Right.
That being a real strategy. So, yes, I agree with your thinking.
Yeah. So in closing here, you got any quotes that are some of your favorite quotes or quotes that you've been sharing with the universe?
I wish I could. I think your quote. We had a few quotes before we got on here. But what was the quote? If you don't give a shit, don't. If you give a shit, act like it. How's that for a quote?
I like it. Let's go. Let's go with that. I'm all for replaying the best hits. All right, man. Well, look, it's been a pleasure reconnecting with you. Thanks for everything you do. Yeah, thanks for doing everything you do with the industry and being a thought leader. And I call you an action leader instead of a thought leader, because it's not about good ideas, it's about executing on good ideas. So thanks for all your work, and it's appreciated.
Oh, listen, Pete, you're a legend. So it's big news coming from you. Great compliment. The same goes back at you guys and your team.
All right,
That's
man.
kudos to you. All
All
right.
right, keep doing great things, man. I appreciate it. Good to see you again, and be safe.
Take care, guys.
Take care, buddy. Bye. As we continue to build our Halo Talks email notification database, want to offer you a free $10 instant gift card from our friends at Promotion Vault. Also to show you how easy it is to offer your members and prospects and clients the ability to get desired actions out of them and reward them in real time. Go to halotalks.com, put your email address into the pop-up box, see how it works, get a free $10 gift card from us, and keep listening and making everybody great.